Welcome to Tech with Kaushik. This is part 10 of our complete practice question series for the AZ-104 Microsoft Azure Administrator exam. Test your knowledge with exam-focused questions covering key Azure administration concepts. Choose your answer before the timer ends, then review the correct answer, clear explanation, and practical exam tip. Let us begin part 10. The next item is question number 385. We are now working with network security groups. Your company plans to deploy 6 virtual machines, to a single virtual network subnet. Each VM requires both a private IP address and a public IP address. Inbound and outbound network access filtering rules for all 6 virtual machines must be completely identical. What is the minimum number of network security groups, NSGs, required to satisfy this requirement? Option A 6. Option B 3. Option C 2. Option D 1. In this case, select option D1. The reasoning is as follows. A single network security group, NSG, can be associated with a virtual network subnet or attached to all network interfaces, NICs, on the subnet. Because all 6 virtual machines require identical inbound and outbound rules, 1 NSG is sufficient. The incorrect choices fail for the following reasons. A. Creating 6 NSGs adds unnecessary administrative overhead when rules are identical. B. 3 NSGs is redundant for identical rule requirements. C. 2 NSGs is unnecessary when a single NSG applied at the subnet level covers all virtual machines. Keep this examination point in mind. Associate an NSG at the subnet level to apply uniform security rules across all virtual machines in that subnet. Let us examine question number 386. Consider the following scenario. All members of the finance group require the same Microsoft 365 license. The license must be assigned automatically when a user joins the group and removed automatically when the user leaves. Proposed solution: assign the product license to the finance group. Does the solution meet the goal? Now examine the possible answers. Option A is yes. Option B is no. The best answer is option A. Yes. The key reason is group-based licensing applies the selected license to group members and removes the inherited assignment when they leave, provided no other assignment source grants the license. Now consider why the remaining options are unsuitable. B. Assigning the license to the group provides the required automatic lifecycle. Exam tip. Group-based licensing automates license assignment and removal based on Microsoft Entra Group membership. We will now analyze question number 387. The focus now shifts to availability sets. Review the scenario carefully. You are creating an availability set in an Azure region that supports 3 managed disk fault domains. You want virtual machines to be distributed across the maximum number of fault domains available in that region. What value should you assign to the platform fault domain count property? Review each available choice. Choice A, 1. Choice B, 2. Choice C, 3. Choice D, 20. The required response is option C3. The requirement is satisfied because the region supports 3 fault domains, so setting platform fault domain count to 3 provides the maximum supported fault isolation for the availability set. A. 1 fault domain provides no rack-level distribution. B. 2 is supported but does not use the region's maximum. D. 20 is the maximum update domain count, not the fault domain count. Availability sets support up to 3 fault domains and up to 20 update domains. Regional fault domain support can be 2 or 3. Review question number 388. Carefully. Let us first review the situation. You are provisioning 8 virtual machines to a dedicated subnet inside an Azure virtual network. Each VM must be configured with a private IP address and an associated public IP address. What is the minimum number of network interfaces, NICs, required for this deployment? Compare the following options. Choice A, 8. Choice B, 16. Choice C, 24. Choice D, 32. The appropriate choice is option A8. Here is the technical justification. Each VM requires at least one NIC. The NIC's primary IP configuration has a private IP address and can be associated with a public IP address, so 8 virtual machines require 8 NICs. The other choices do not satisfy the requirement because B, 16 NICs is unnecessary because public and private IP configurations can share a single NIC. C, 24 NICs exceeds the requirement. D, 32 NICs exceeds the requirement. Remember this distinction for the exam. A public IP resource is associated with a NIC IP configuration, it does not require a separate NIC. Question number 389. Highlights an important distinction. The central scenario is as follows. Your company needs to establish an IPsec site-to-site VPN between its Chicago branch office and Azure Virtual Network VNet Hub. Select the appropriate configuration for each location. Select the value that correctly completes each statement. Review Statement 1. In Azure, you must the blank. The available choices are create a VPN virtual network gateway, a local network gateway, and a connection, create only an ExpressRoute circuit, or deploy an on-premises data gateway. Review Statement 2. At the Chicago branch office, you must the blank. The available choices are configure the on-premises VPN device with matching IPsec/IKE parameters, deploy Azure ExpressRoute, or deploy a web application proxy. Statement 1 should be completed with create a VPN virtual network gateway, a local network gateway, and a connection. These Azure resources define both tunnel endpoints and create the IPsec connection. Statement 2 should be completed with configure the on-premises VPN device with matching IPsec/IKE parameters. The branch device must use parameters compatible with the Azure VPN connection. The key takeaway is a site-to-site VPN uses a VPN gateway, local network gateway, Azure connection, and a compatible on-premises VPN device. Now consider question number 390. We are moving to Entra license management. Consider this scenario. Employees whose department attribute is accounting must automatically become members of a group and receive a Microsoft 365 license. When the department attribute changes, both membership and the inherited license must update automatically. Which capabilities should you configure? Available choices. Choice A. An administrative unit and an access package. Choice B. A dynamic user group and group-based licensing. Choice C. Microsoft Entra external ID and an app registration. Choice D. A logic app and a Microsoft Identity Manager agent. The correct answer is option B. A dynamic user group and group-based licensing. This is correct because a dynamic membership rule can evaluate the department attribute, and a license assigned to that group follows the resulting membership changes. The remaining options are incorrect because A. Administrative units delegate administration and access packages govern access requests, they do not directly implement this attribute-driven license flow. C. External ID and app registration serve external identity and application scenarios. D. Custom automation is unnecessary for functionality available natively. A useful examination rule is this. Combine dynamic membership rules with group-based licensing for attribute-driven license automation. Evaluate question number 391. Against every requirement. Identify the decisive requirement in this scenario. User 1 has the reader role at subscription 1 and the contributor role at resource group RG1. Virtual machine VM1 is in RG1. User 1 needs to restart VM1. Proposed solution, use the existing contributor assignment on RG1 without adding another role. Does the solution meet the goal? Evaluate each option against the stated requirement. Next, option A. Yes. Next, option B. No. The correct answer is option A. Yes. Contributor at RG1 is inherited by VM1 and includes virtual machine management actions such as restart. The reader assignment at the broader subscription scope does not reduce the contributor permissions. The alternatives can be eliminated because B, Azure RBAC permissions are additive, and the contributor role inherited from RG1 permits the required action. Keep this examination point in mind. Azure RBAC assignments are additive across scopes. A narrower contributor assignment can provide more access than a broader reader assignment. Let us work through question number 392. This question moves us into external user management. Begin by examining the scenario. A consultant from another organization must access selected Azure resources by using the consultant's existing external identity. Proposed solution: invite the consultant to your Microsoft Entra tenant as AB2B guest user, and then assign the required Azure RBAC role. Does the solution meet the goal? Choose from the following options. Option A is yes. Option B is no. In this case, select option A. Yes. The reasoning is as follows. A Microsoft Entra B2B guest can authenticate with an external identity and can receive Azure RBAC assignments in the resource tenant. The incorrect choices fail for the following reasons. B. Guest invitation plus an appropriately scoped Azure role is the supported pattern for this requirement. Exam tip. Invite external collaborators as guest users, then grant only the Azure RBAC role and scope they require. Proceed to question number 393. Scenario. A virtual machine named VMAP03 hosted on VNet1 cannot establish outbound network connections. You suspect that Network Security Group, NSG, security rules are dropping the traffic. Which Azure tool should you use to verify whether traffic is being blocked by NSG rules? Review the options. Choice A: Network Topology Diagram in VNet1. Choice B: Diagnostic Settings in Azure Monitor. Choice C: Security Recommendations in Azure Advisor. Choice D: IP Flow Verify in Azure Network Watcher. The best answer is option D. IP Flow Verify in Azure Network Watcher. The key reason is IP Flow Verify in Azure Network Watcher tests packet delivery to or from a virtual machine based on 5 tuple parameters. It explicitly indicates whether a packet is allowed or denied and identifies the exact NSG rule responsible for the decision. Now consider why the remaining options are unsuitable. A. DNet topology diagrams illustrate resource connections but do not evaluate active NSG rule evaluation. B. Azure Monitor diagnostic settings capture logs but do not perform immediate packet flow verification tests. C. Azure Advisor provides general security recommendations, not specific real-time packet filtering checks. Use IP Flow Verify in Network Watcher to determine if an NSG rule is blocking specific VM traffic. Question number 394. Next, we enter the topic of virtual machines. Review the situation. After deploying a Windows Server virtual machine, you must automatically download and run a PowerShell script to install and configure an application. Which Azure feature should you use? The options are: Option A: Custom Script Extension. Option B: Network Security Group. Option C: Boot Diagnostics. Option D: Availability Set. The required response is option A: Custom Script Extension. The requirement is satisfied because the custom script extension downloads and executes scripts on Azure virtual machines for post-deployment configuration and software installation. B. An NSG filters network traffic. C. Boot Diagnostics captures startup logs and screenshots. D. An availability set distributes virtual machines across fault and update domains. Remember this distinction for the exam. Use VM extensions for post-deployment configuration. Use custom data or CloudInit for first boot provisioning payloads. We will now analyze question number 395. Let us first review the situation. You are migrating an internal application from on-premises servers to two Azure virtual machines, VMApp01 and VMApp02, deployed on a single subnet. The application requires both virtual machines to maintain static private IP addresses. What should you do to configure static private IP addresses? Compare the following options. Choice A, modify private IP configuration settings for the network interface in the Azure portal. Choice B, modify IP version 4 properties inside Windows Network and Sharing Center on each VM. Choice C, execute the set AZ subnet PowerShell command. Choice D, edit local hosts files on each VM. The appropriate choice is option A, modify private IP configuration settings for the network interface in the Azure portal. Here is the technical justification. Configure the private IP allocation as static on each Azure NIC IP configuration. Keep the guest operating system adapter configured for DHCP so it receives the Azure assigned address. The other choices do not satisfy the requirement because B, changing IP settings inside the guest OS breaks network connectivity to the Azure virtual network. C, set AZ subnet modifies subnet address spaces, not individual VM static IP assignments. D, local hosts files modify name resolution, not IP configuration. The key takeaway is always configure static IP addresses on the Azure NIC configuration, leaving guest OS network adapters set to DHCP. Apply precise reasoning to question number 396. Pay close attention to every stated constraint. An administrator named Alex used a single Azure Resource Manager, ARM, template to deploy a virtual machine and a storage account into resource group RG Prod. You need to review the exact ARM template that was executed for this deployment. Proposed solution: you open the Azure portal and access the deployments blade within resource group RG Prod. Does the solution meet the goal? Compare every choice before deciding. Consider option A. Yes. Consider option B. No. The required response is option A. Yes. This is correct because the resource group's deployments page records resource group scope deployments and lets you inspect the template, parameters, operations, and deployment details used for the selected deployment. The remaining options are incorrect because B, the deployments blade within the resource group explicitly records historical deployment templates. A useful examination rule is this. Resource group leads to deployments provides access to historical ARM templates used for provisioning. Now consider question number 397. Review the situation. Group 1 is a dynamic user group with the rule, user.department EQ sales. User 1 currently has department set to marketing and must qualify for Group 1 membership. Proposed solution: change User 1's department property to sales. Does the solution meet the goal? Available choices. Option A. Yes. Option B. No. The correct answer is option A. Yes. After the user property is updated and dynamic membership processing completes, the rule evaluates as true and user 1 becomes a member of Group 1. The alternatives can be eliminated because B, the proposed property change directly satisfies the dynamic membership rule. Keep this examination point in mind. Dynamic groups recalculate membership from supported user or device properties. Processing is automatic but not necessarily instantaneous. The next item is question number 398. The focus now shifts to Azure Load Balancer. Consider this scenario. You are configuring an Azure internal load balancer to serve as the listener endpoint for a SQL Server always-on availability group hosted on Azure virtual machines. Proposed solution: you enable floating IP on the load balancing rule. Does the solution meet the goal? The options are: Choice A. Yes. Choice B. No. In this case, select option A. Yes. The reasoning is as follows. SQL Server Always On Availability Group listeners require direct server return, floating IP, enabled on Azure Load Balancer rules. This allows backend replica virtual machines to respond directly to client requests using the listener virtual IP address. The incorrect choices fail for the following reasons. B. Floating IP is required for SQL Always On listeners on Azure Load Balancers. Exam tip. SQL Server Always On Availability Group listeners require floating IP, direct server return, enabled on load balancing rules. Question number 399. User 1 has the reader role assigned at resource group RG1. Storage account storage 1 is contained in RG1. User 1 needs to view the storage account configuration but must not modify it. Proposed solution: do not add another role assignment. Does the solution meet the goal? Option A. Yes. Option B. No. The best answer is option A. Yes. The key reason is the reader assignment at RG1 is inherited by storage 1 and permits viewing control plane configuration without write permissions. Now consider why the remaining options are unsuitable. B. The existing inherited reader assignment already provides the required access. Role assignments at a parent scope are inherited by child resources unless an explicit deny assignment applies. Let us examine question number 400. Treat this as a medium question. Begin by examining the scenario. You are configuring Azure VM Backup in a Recovery Services vault. Which 4 virtual machine operating system or power state scenarios are supported for Azure VM Backup? Each correct selection presents a complete answer. Choose every option that satisfies the requirement. Review each available choice. Option A is a Windows 11 64-bit Azure VM. Option B is a supported 64-bit Linux Azure VM. Option C is an Azure VM that is running. Option D is an Azure VM that is stopped, deallocated. Option E is a Windows 32-bit Azure VM. The appropriate choice is option A. A Windows 11 64-bit Azure VM, B. A supported 64-bit Linux Azure VM, C. An Azure VM that is running, D. An Azure VM that is stopped, deallocated. The requirement is satisfied because Azure VM Backup supports Windows 11 64-bit, supported 64-bit Linux distributions, running virtual machines, and shut down or deallocated virtual machines. An offline VM backup is crash consistent. E. Agent-based Azure VM Backup does not support 32-bit operating systems. Remember this distinction for the exam. Azure VM Backup supports running and deallocated virtual machines. Deallocated VM backups are crash consistent rather than application consistent. Proceed to question number 401. Scenario. You need a consolidated Azure monitoring experience that collects guest operating system performance data for virtual machines, including memory utilization and process level information. You want the simplest onboarding option. Which feature should you use? Review the options. Choice A, Azure Activity Log. Choice B, Azure Advisor. Choice C, Azure Monitor VM Insights. Choice D, Azure Traffic Analytics. The required response is option C, Azure Monitor VM Insights. Here is the technical justification. VM Insights onboards virtual machines to guest monitoring and provides operating system performance views for processor, memory, disks, network adapters, and processes. The other choices do not satisfy the requirement because A. Activity log records control plane operations. B. Advisor provides optimization recommendations. D. Traffic Analytics analyzes network flow information rather than guest OS performance. The key takeaway is platform metrics are collected automatically, but guest memory and process data require guest monitoring such as VM Insights. Proceed to question number 402. Next, we enter the topic of Azure RBAC. Review the situation. You plan to create a custom Azure RBAC role named Custom Role 1 by extracting and modifying an existing built-in role template using Azure PowerShell. Select the correct PowerShell complete segments to retrieve and serialize the baseline built-in definition. Choose the correct entry for every drop-down field. Statement 1. Base definition retrieval complete, the blank name reader. The options for this statement are get AZ role definition, find role capability, or get AZ resource provider. Statement 2. Pipeline conversion complete, the blank. The options for this statement are convert to JSON, convert from JSON, or convert to XML. For statement 1, select Get AZ Role Definition. Fetches the existing role definition template. For statement 2, select Convert to JSON. Serializes the definition object to JSON for editing. A useful examination rule is this. Get AZ Role Definition, Convert to JSON exports built-in RBAC definitions for custom role creation. Now consider question number 403. Consider this scenario. An administrator deployed a virtual machine and a storage account into a resource group using a single ARM template. You need to inspect the ARM deployment template that was used. Proposed solution, you navigate to the virtual machine blade in the Azure portal and inspect its settings. Does the solution meet the goal? The options are: Choice A. Yes. Choice B. No. The best answer is option B, no. This is correct because navigating to the virtual machine blade only shows resource-specific settings or the single VM export template. It does not display the overall resource group ARM deployment template that simultaneously created both the VM and the storage account. The remaining options are incorrect because A. The VM blade does not store overall multi-resource deployment history for the resource group. Keep this examination point in mind. View group-wide deployment templates under resource group leads to deployments. Let us work through question number 404. Consider the following scenario. An administrator deployed a virtual machine and a storage account using an ARM template. You need to review the original deployment template. Proposed solution, you open the blob container blade inside the storage account in the Azure portal. Does the solution meet the goal? Now examine the possible answers. Choice A, yes. Choice B, no. The correct answer is option B, no. The blob container blade manages blob storage data objects and container access policies. It does not provide access to Azure Resource Manager deployment logs or templates. The alternatives can be eliminated because A. Container settings do not track resource group ARM deployments. Exam tip. Blob containers store data, not resource group deployment templates. Review question number 405. Carefully. This question moves us into VNet peering. Review the scenario carefully. Virtual Network VNet A contains a VPN gateway supporting site-to-site and point-to-site (P2S) connections from Windows workstations. VNet A is paired with VNet B. On-premises networks can access resources in VNet B via gateway transit, but remote P2S Windows clients connected to VNet A cannot reach resources in VNet B. Proposed solution, you enable the Allow Gateway Transit setting on VNet B. Does the solution meet the goal? Choose from the following options. Option A is yes. Option B is no. In this case, select option B, no. The reasoning is as follows. VNet B does not host the VPN gateway, VNet A contains the gateway. Enabling Allow Gateway Transit on VNet B is incorrect because gateway transit must be enabled on the VNet that owns the gateway, VNet A, while Use Remote Gateways is configured on VNet B. The incorrect choices fail for the following reasons. A. Allow Gateway Transit must be enabled on the gateway host VNet, VNet A, not the spoke VNet, VNet B. Enable Allow Gateway Transit on the gateway VNet and use Remote Gateways on the paired spoke VNet. Review question number 406 carefully. Let us first review the situation. Virtual Network VNet A contains a VPN gateway supporting site-to-site and point-to-site connections. You pair VNet A with VNet B. Site-to-site traffic accesses VNet B, but remote point-to-site Windows workstations connected to VNet A cannot access resources in VNet B. Proposed solution: you allow gateway transit on VNet A without updating or reinstalling the VPN client package on the Windows workstations. Does the solution meet the goal? Now examine the possible answers. Choice A, yes. Choice B, no. The appropriate choice is option B, no. The key reason is while allow gateway transit on VNet A is required, point-to-site (P2S) VPN clients will not automatically receive routes for newly paired VNets, VNet B. The VPN client configuration package must be re-downloaded and reinstalled on the Windows workstations to push the updated routes. Now consider why the remaining options are unsuitable. A. Enabling gateway transit alone is insufficient for P2S clients without updating the workstation VPN client package. Remember this distinction for the exam. After pairing VNets, update and reinstall the P2S client package on remote workstations to push new VNet routes. Question number 407. We are moving to virtual networks. Remote employees working from personal workstations require secure access to virtual machines hosted inside an Azure Virtual Network, VNet 1. Which solution should you implement? Option A, site-to-site, S2S, VPN. Option B, VNet to VNet VPN. Option C, point-to-site, P2S, VPN. Option D, ExpressRoute Direct. The best answer is option C, point-to-site, P2S, VPN. The requirement is satisfied because a point-to-site, P2S, VPN allows individual remote client devices, such as home workstations, to securely connect to an Azure Virtual Network over the Internet. A. Site-to-site, S2S, VPN connects an entire on-premises network/office location to Azure, not individual remote workers. B. VNet to VNet connects two Azure Virtual Networks together. D. ExpressRoute Direct provides dedicated enterprise private connectivity between corporate data centers and Azure. The key takeaway is point-to-site, P2S, VPN provides secure connectivity for individual remote client devices. The next item is question number 408. Scenario. You are setting up an Azure internal load balancer to route traffic to a SQL Server always on availability group listener on Azure virtual machines. Proposed solution: you configure an HTTP health probe targeting port 1433. Does the solution meet the goal? Available choices. Choice A, yes. Choice B, no. The required response is option B, no. Here is the technical justification. SQL Server default instances communicate over TCP port 1433, not HTTP. An HTTP health probe expects an HTTP 200 OK response from a web service, which SQL Server on port 1433 will not return, causing the probe to mark backends as unhealthy. A TCP probe, or dedicated always-on TCP probe port like 59999, must be used. The other choices do not satisfy the requirement because A. HTTP health probes will fail when targeting non-HTTP TCP ports like SQL 1433. A useful examination rule is this. Use TCP health probes for SQL Server always-on listener endpoints, not HTTP probes. Let us work through question number 409. Consider the following scenario. All users whose department property is engineering must automatically receive license 1, and the license must be removed when they leave the department. Proposed solution: create a dynamic user group based on the department property and assign license 1 to the group. Does the solution meet the goal? Compare the following options. Option A is yes. Option B is no. The appropriate choice is option A. Yes. This is correct because the dynamic group updates membership from the department property, and group-based licensing follows those membership changes. The remaining options are incorrect because B. The combined dynamic group and group license assignment implements the required automatic lifecycle. Keep this examination point in mind. Dynamic groups determine membership, group-based licensing applies and removes inherited product licenses. Question number 410. Requires careful analysis. Analyze the scenario before evaluating the choices. A Microsoft Entra user cannot be assigned a location-dependent product license because the user's usage location property is blank. Proposed solution: set the user's usage location to the correct two-letter country or region code, and then retry the license assignment. Does the solution meet the goal? Eliminate any option that fails a requirement. Next, option A. Yes. Next, option B. No. The correct answer is option A. Yes. Microsoft Entra requires a valid usage location before assigning licenses whose services depend on regional availability. The alternatives can be eliminated because B. Setting usage location resolves this common license assignment prerequisite. Exam tip: set usage location as part of user provisioning before assigning Microsoft Cloud product licenses. Now consider question number 411. Scenario: you configure an Azure internal load balancer as the listener for a SQL Server always-on availability group running on Azure virtual machines. Proposed solution: you set session persistence to client IP on the load balancing rule. Does the solution meet the goal? Review the options. Option A. Yes. Option B. No. In this case, select option B, no. The reasoning is as follows. SQL Server always-on availability group listeners require session persistence set to none. Setting session persistence to client IP interferes with failover routing when availability group primary roles shift between replica virtual machines. The incorrect choices fail for the following reasons. A. Client IP session persistence prevents proper failover redirection for availability group listeners. Set session persistence to none for SQL Server always-on availability group load balancing rules. Proceed to question number 413. This question moves us into blob lifecycle management. Consider this scenario. An Azure storage account named Storage1 has the default access tier hot and contains container 1. Rule 1 applies to blobs whose prefix is container1/dep1. It moves base blobs to archive when they have not been modified for more than 2 days and deletes them after more than 9 days. Rule 2 applies to all blobs in Storage1. It moves base blobs to cool after more than 3 days without modification and to archive after more than 9 days. Blob activity: October 1st, upload dep1/file1.docs, file2.docs, and file3.docs to container1. October 2nd, modify dep1/file1.docs and file3.docs. October 5th, modify file2.docs. For each statement, select yes if the statement is true. Otherwise, select no. Statement 1. On October 10th, you can directly read the contents of dep1/file1.docs without rehydration. Statement 2. On October 10th, you can directly read the contents of file2.docs. Statement 3. On October 10th, you can directly read the contents of file3.docs. Statement 1 should be marked no. The blob has been unmodified for 8 days and Rule 1 has moved it to archive. Statement 2 should be marked yes. The blob has been unmodified for 5 days and is in the online cool tier. Statement 3 should be marked yes. The blob has been unmodified for 8 days and is in the online cool tier. Remember this distinction for the exam. Cool tier blobs remain online, archive tier blobs must be rehydrated before their contents can be read. Question number 414. Review the situation. You manage blob container 1. New blobs written to the container must not be modified or deleted for 365 days. What should you configure? Review the options. Choice A. The default access tier. Choice B. A time-based immutability policy on container 1. Choice C. A reader role assignment on container 1. Choice D. The public access level. The best answer is option B. A time-based immutability policy on container 1. The key reason is a time-based immutability policy provides write once, read many protection, and blocks modification and deletion for the configured retention period. Now consider why the remaining options are unsuitable. A. Access tiers affect cost and retrieval characteristics. C. Reader controls a principal's access but does not enforce worm retention against authorized writers. D. Public access controls anonymous access. The key takeaway is use a time-based immutability policy for fixed worm retention. Use a legal hold when the retention duration is not predetermined. Next, question number 415. The focus now shifts to virtual machines. Scenario. You plan to deploy an Ubuntu server virtual machine to your Azure subscription using Azure PowerShell. The deployment requires a custom Cloud.init script to inject a corporate trusted root certification authority, CA. Which PowerShell complete should you use to create the virtual machine? Option A. New Azure RMVM. Option B. New AZ-VM. Option C. Create AZ-VM. Option D. Start AZ-VM. The required response is option B. New AZ-VM. The requirement is satisfied because New AZ-VM is the current AZ PowerShell complete that creates an Azure VM. A Cloud.init payload is supplied through the VM configuration or custom data settings used by the deployment. A. New Azure RMVM belongs to the deprecated Azure RM module. C. Create AZ-VM is not a valid PowerShell complete. D. Start AZ-VM starts an existing deallocated VM rather than deploying a new VM. A useful examination rule is this. Use new AZ-VM with the AZ module. Azure RM completes are legacy. We will now analyze question number 416. Review the scenario carefully. You have 4 Azure storage accounts: Storage 1, Standard General Purpose v2 with LRS Storage 2, Standard General Purpose v2 with ZRS Storage 3, Premium Block Blob Storage 4, Premium File Storage. You need to create Blob Container 1 and Azure File Share 1. Select the storage accounts that support each resource type. Review each blank and choose the most appropriate option. For the first statement, Container 1 can be created in the blank. Select from Storage 1, Storage 2, and Storage 3 only, Storage 1 and Storage 2 only, Storage 3 only, or Storage 1, Storage 2, and Storage 4 only. For the second statement, Share 1 can be created in the blank. Select from Storage 1, Storage 2, and Storage 4 only, Storage 1 and Storage 2 only, Storage 4 only, or Storage 2, Storage 3, and Storage 4 only. The answer to the first statement is Storage 1, Storage 2, and Storage 3 only. Both GPv2 accounts and Premium Block Blobs support blob containers. The answer to the second statement is Storage 1, Storage 2, and Storage 4 only. Both GPv2 accounts and Premium File Storage support Azure File Shares. Keep this examination point in mind. GPv2 supports blobs and files, Premium Block Blobs is blob only, and Premium File Storage is file only. Let us examine question number 417. Next, we enter the topic of availability sets. Begin by examining the scenario. You are configuring an ARM template to deploy virtual machines into an availability set. You need to ensure maximum availability during rolling platform update operations. What is the maximum value you can configure for the platform update domain count property? Choose from the following options. Choice A, 5. Choice B, 20. Choice C, 30. Choice D, 40. The appropriate choice is option B, 20. Here is the technical justification. In Azure Resource Manager, the maximum value for the platform update domain count property in an availability set is 20. The other choices do not satisfy the requirement because A, 5 is lower than the maximum supported count of 20. C, 30 exceeds the maximum limit allowed by Azure for update domains. D, 40 exceeds the maximum limit allowed by Azure for update domains. Exam tip. Availability sets support a maximum of 20 update domains in Azure. The next item is question number 418. An ARM template must obtain an administrator password from a secure store during deployment. The password must not be stored in plain text in the template or parameter file. Which two configurations are required? Each correct selection forms part of the solution. Identify all valid responses. The options are: Option A, store the password as a secret in Azure Key Vault. Option B, enable Azure Resource Manager for template deployment on the Key Vault. Option C, enable blob immutability on a storage account. Option D, create an Azure policy definition for password length. Option E, create an Azure backup vault. The correct answer is option A, store the password as a secret in Azure Key Vault. B, enable Azure Resource Manager for template deployment on the Key Vault. This is correct because the secret must be stored in Key Vault, and the vault must allow Azure Resource Manager template deployment so the parameter reference can retrieve the secret at deployment time. The remaining options are incorrect because C, blob immutability does not provide deployment secret resolution. D, Azure policy can evaluate compliance but cannot inject a password. E, a backup vault stores recovery data, not deployment secrets. For ARM parameter references to Key Vault secrets, set enabled for template deployment to true on the vault. Let us examine question number 419. Consider the following scenario. You create and generalize a custom Windows Server VHD image in your local environment. You need to upload the VHD file directly to an Azure Storage Account container to provision custom Azure Virtual Machine images. Which PowerShell command should you execute? Review each available choice. Option A is add AZVM. Option B is add AZVHD. Option C is add AZImage. Option D is add AZImage data disk. In this case, select option B. Add AZVHD. Add AZVHD uploads an on-premises virtual hard disk .vhd file from a local computer to a blob storage account in Azure. The alternatives can be eliminated because A, add AZVM is not a valid command for uploading VHD files. C, add AZImage is not the command used to upload raw VHD files from local storage. D, add AZImage data disk attaches a data disk to an image configuration, not a network VHD uploader. Remember this distinction for the exam. Use add AZVHD to upload custom local VHD files to Azure Storage. Review question number 420. Carefully. Review the scenario carefully. Virtual machine VM1 runs in East US. You must configure Azure Site Recovery to replicate VM1 to West US for regional disaster recovery. Which three actions should you perform? Each correct selection forms part of the solution. Select all answers that apply. Review each available choice. Choice A, create or select a recovery services vault. Choice B, enable replication for VM1 from the vault. Choice C, configure the target region, target resource settings, and replication settings. Choice D, create an Azure backup vault. Choice E, configure an Azure Traffic Manager profile before enabling replication. Choice F, configure a site-to-site VPN before enabling replication. The correct answer is option A, create or select a recovery services vault. B, enable replication for VM1 from the vault. C, configure the target region, target resource settings, and replication settings. The reasoning is as follows. Azure to Azure Site Recovery is configured through a recovery services vault. Enabling replication requires selecting the source VM and defining the target and replication settings. The incorrect choices fail for the following reasons. D. A backup vault is not used for Azure VM site recovery orchestration. E. Traffic Manager is optional for application traffic management and is not a replication prerequisite. F. A site-to-site VPN is not required to enable Azure-to-Azure replication. The key takeaway is Azure Site Recovery provides replication and failover. Azure Backup creates recovery points for restore operations. Now consider question number 421. We are moving to role assignment scope. Review the situation. User 1 holds reader, security admin, and security reader roles on subscription 1. You need to grant user 1 the ability to assign the reader role on virtual network VNet 1 to other users without granting excessive administrative permissions across the subscription. What should you do? Available choices. Option A. Remove user 1 from the security reader and reader roles on subscription 1. Option B. Assign user 1 the user access administrator role for VNet 1. Option C. Assign user 1 the network contributor role for VNet 1. Option D. Assign user 1 the network contributor role for resource group RG1. The best answer is option B. Assign user 1 the user access administrator role for VNet 1. The key reason is assigning Azure RBAC roles requires the Microsoft authorization/role assignment/write permission. The user access administrator role includes this permission. Scoping the role assignment directly to VNet 1 allows user 1 to grant permissions on VNet 1 specifically, adhering to least privilege. Now consider why the remaining options are unsuitable. A. Removing roles from subscription 1 does not grant role assignment privileges on VNet 1. C. Network contributor allows network management, subnets, peerings, but does not include RBAC role assignment permissions. D. Network contributor on RG1 does not grant role assignment permissions and broaden scope unnecessarily. A useful examination rule is this. Assign user access administrator at the specific resource scope to delegate RBAC role assignment authority under least privilege. Proceed to question number 422. Scenario. An organization has an Azure subscription containing a storage account named Stata01. The subscription is linked to a Microsoft Entra ID tenant named Fabricam.com, which synchronizes with an on-premises Active Directory Domain Services (ADDS) domain. The on-premises domain contains user A, user account, workstation 1, computer account. Microsoft Entra ID also contains user B, a cloud-only user. The storage account contains an Azure file share named Corp Files and is configured for on-premises ADDS identity-based authentication. For each statement, select yes if the statement is true. Otherwise, select no. Review Statement 1. You can assign the storage file data SMB share contributor role to user A for Corp Files. Review Statement 2. You can assign the storage file data SMB share reader role to workstation 1 for Corp Files. Review Statement 3. After assigning an SMB share role to user B can access Corp Files over SMB by using ADDS authentication. The answer to Statement 1 is yes. The synchronized user has a matching Microsoft Entra identity for the share level role. The answer to Statement 2 is no. Azure File Share Level RBAC cannot be assigned to computer accounts. The answer to Statement 3 is no. A cloud-only user has no matching ADDS identity for this authentication method. Keep this examination point in mind. For granular Azure Files permissions with ADDS authentication, use identities synchronized from ADDS. Computer accounts and cloud-only users cannot use that ADDS identity path. Let us work through question number 424. Next, we enter the topic of monitor alerts. Let us first review the situation. You have an Azure virtual machine named VM App Server that runs Windows Server. You need to generate an Azure alert whenever more than 2 error-level events are recorded in the system event log on VM App Server within a 1-hour window. Proposed solution: you create a log analytics workspace. You install the Azure Monitor agent on VM App Server and associate the VM with a data collection rule that collects error-level events from the system log and sends them to the workspace. You then create a log search alert rule with a 1-hour evaluation window and a threshold greater than 2 records. Does this meet the goal? Choose from the following options. Option A is yes. Option B is no. The required response is option A. Yes. The requirement is satisfied because the Azure Monitor agent and an associated data collection rule send the required Windows system events to the event table in Log Analytics. A log search alert can then count matching error level records over 1 hour and trigger when the count exceeds 2. B. The proposed configuration uses the current guest log collection model and a log search alert with the required threshold and time window. Exam tip. Azure Monitor Agent collects guest operating system logs through data collection rules. Log search alerts evaluate the ingested log analytics data. Question number 425. Now, an enterprise web application runs on an Azure app service named AppWeb01. Developers push new application updates to a source control repository. AppWeb01 has 2 deployment slots. AppWeb01 Prod, Production, AppWeb01 Stage, Staging. You need to deploy the new application build, test it in an isolated environment, and then publish it to production users without downtime. Which 2 actions should you perform? Each correct answer presents part of the solution. Select exactly 2 answers. Choices. Option A. Deploy the application update to AppWeb01 Stage, and then test the update. Option B. Stop the AppWeb01 prod slot before deploying the update. Option C. Deploy the application update directly to AppWeb01 prod, and then perform testing. Option D. Swap the AppWeb01 stage and AppWeb01 prod deployment slots. E. Stop the AppWeb01 stage slot after testing is completed. Select option A. Deploy the application update to AppWeb01 stage, and then test the update, and option D. Swap the AppWeb01 stage and AppWeb01 prod deployment slots. Here is the technical justification. Deploying first to the staging slot, AppWeb01 stage, allows thorough testing without impacting live users on the production slot, AppWeb01 prod. Once verified, swapping the staging and production slots promotes the tested application to production seamlessly with zero downtime. The other choices do not satisfy the requirement because B. Stopping production creates unnecessary downtime for existing users. C. Deploying directly to production risks exposing untested changes to live users. E. Stopping the staging slot is unnecessary and prevents post-swap validation or rollback if needed. Deployment slots enable zero downtime deployments by testing and staging before performing a slot swap. The next item is question number 426. You have an Azure subscription containing a log analytics workspace named Law Operational. You need to write a Custo query language, KQL, query to find all records containing the term error within a table named event. Which query should you execute in Law Operational? Choice A. Select asterisk from event where event type equals error. Choice B. Get event where $_event type EQ error. Choice C. Search in event error. Choice D. Search in event asterisk where event type EQ error. The appropriate choice is option C. Search in event error. This is correct because in Azure Log Analytics KQL, search in event error restricts a text search for the term error specifically across the event table. The remaining options are incorrect because A. SQL query syntax is not supported in Azure Monitor Log Analytics KQL queries. B. PowerShell pipeline syntax cannot be run as a KQL query in Log Analytics. D. Uses PowerShell comparison syntax, EQ, rather than valid KQL syntax. Remember this distinction for the exam. Use the KQL search in table string syntax to perform full-text searches across a targeted table in Log Analytics. Question number 428. The focus now shifts to Entra users and groups. Consider this scenario. A Microsoft Entra ID tenant named Contoso.onmicrosoft.com contains the following dynamic and assigned groups. Group 1, Security Group Type, Dynamic User Membership Rule. User.city starts with M. Group 2. Microsoft 365 Group Type. Dynamic User Membership Rule. User.department not in. Human Resources. Group 3. Microsoft 365 Group Type. Assigned membership type 2 user accounts are configured with the following properties. User 1. City equals Montreal. Department equals Human Resources. Microsoft 365 license equals assigned user 2. City equals Melbourne. Department equals Marketing. Microsoft 365 license equals none. Determine the group memberships for each user. Complete each statement by selecting the appropriate value. The first statement reads, User 1 is a member of the blank. Choose between Group 1 only, Group 2 only, Group 3 only, Group 1 and Group 2 only, Group 1 and Group 3 only, Group 2 and Group 3 only, or Group 1, Group 2, and Group 3. The second statement reads, User 2 is a member of the blank. Choose between Group 1 only, Group 2 only, Group 3 only, Group 1 and Group 2 only, Group 1 and Group 3 only, Group 2 and Group 3 only, or Group 1, Group 2, and Group 3. The correct value for Statement 1 is Group 1 only. City Montreal matches Group 1, Department fails Group 2 not in rule. The correct value for Statement 2 is Group 1 and Group 2 only. City Melbourne matches Group 1, Department Marketing satisfies Group 2 not in rule. The key takeaway is dynamic group evaluation is automatic based on user attributes, and assigned groups require explicit direct membership. Proceed to question number 429. An Azure subscription contains a virtual network named VNet1. The following users are assigned built-in RBAC roles on VNet1, User 1, Owner User 2, Security Admin User 3, Network Contributor. Select the appropriate option for each configuration capability. Choose the correct entry for every drop-down field. The first statement reads, to add a new subnet to VNet1, the action can be performed by the blank. The options for this statement are User 1 only, User 3 only, User 1 and User 3 only, User 2 and User 3 only, or User 1, User 2, and User 3. The second statement reads, to assign another user the reader role on VNet1, the action can be performed by the blank. The options for this statement are User 1 only, User 2 only, User 3 only, User 1 and User 2 only, User 2 and User 3 only, or User 1, User 2, and User 3. The correct value for Statement 1 is User 1 and User 3 only. Owner and Network Contributor roles permit creating subnets. The correct value for Statement 2 is User 1 only. Role assignment requires Owner or User Access Administrator roles. A useful examination rule is this. Network Contributor allows managing network infrastructure, but assigning RBAC roles requires Owner or User Access Administrator. The next item is question number 430. This one is marked hard, eliminate the options systematically. Review the situation. You have two peered virtual networks named VNet1 and VNet2. VNet1 uses Azure-provided DNS. VNet2 uses the custom DNS server 10.10.0.4. VM1 is in VNet1, has IP address 10.10.0.4, and runs a DNS server that is authoritative for Fabricam.com. Its zone contains only an A record for app1.fabricam.com that maps to 10.10.0.10. VM1 has no conditional forwarder to Azure-provided DNS and does not use Azure DNS Private Resolver. VM2 is in VNet1 and its NIC is configured to use 10.10.0.4 as its DNS server. VM3 is in VNet2 and inherits the VNet2 DNS setting of 10.10.0.4. An Azure private DNS zone named Fabricam.com is linked to VNet2 and contains app1, 10.200.0.20 app2, 10.200.0.50. For each statement, select yes if the statement is true. Otherwise, select no. The first statement is, VM2 resolves app2.fabricam.com to 10.200.0.50. The The second statement is, VM2 resolves app1.fabricam.com to 10.10.0.10. The third statement is, VM3 resolves app2.fabricam.com to 10.200.0.50. For the first statement, choose No. VM2 queries VM1, whose authoritative zone has no app2 record. For the second statement, choose Yes. VM1's authoritative zone maps app1 to 10.10.0.10. For the third statement, choose No. VM3 also queries VM1, and no conditional forwarding path reaches Azure Private DNS. Keep this examination point in mind. A custom DNS server must forward the relevant zone to Azure-provided DNS or Azure DNS Private Resolver before linked private zone records can be resolved. You have completed Part 10 of the AZ-104 Microsoft Azure Administrator Exam Practice Series. Keep building your Azure administration skills by opening the complete playlist and continuing with the remaining parts in sequence. If this session helped your preparation, like the video, subscribe to Tech with Kaushik, and enable notifications for more certification exam practice content. Share your score, doubts, or feedback in the comments. I would be happy to hear how your preparation is going. Thank you for learning with Tech with Kaushik. Keep practicing, and I will see you in the next part.